A spark of kindness in Millbrook. In the picturesque town of Millbrook, where cobblestone streets met green meadows and laughter floated like music on the breeze, lived a young boy named Jordan Carter. At 12 years old, Jordan was known as the town's resident helper. His knack for fixing things had earned him the affectionate nickname, Millbrook's Little Handyman. From mending squeaky bicycles to fixing wobbly furniture, Jordan's hands held a magic that could make broken things whole again. He loved the satisfaction of breathing life back into things, much like his mother, Lisa Carter, who taught him that a heart full of kindness and willingness to help was the most precious gift anyone could give. Jordan's home was a cozy 2-bedroom house on Maple Street, a short distance from the towering oak trees of Oak Avenue, where wealthier families lived in large, pristine homes. The Carters didn't have much, but what they did have was shared freely. Lisa Carter often joked that Jordan had been born with a wrench in his hand, ready to solve the world's little problems. Their home overflowed with warmth, laughter, and the smell of Lisa's famous chocolate chip cookies, a treat that Jordan loved to share with friends and neighbors alike. One bright Saturday morning, Jordan was in his makeshift workshop in their garage, working on an old bicycle he found abandoned by the curb. He enjoyed the challenge of making something whole again, giving it a second chance. The sun poured through the small window, casting a golden glow on his workbench cluttered with tools and half-finished projects. His trusty toolbox, a gift from his grandfather, sat beside him, its metal handle worn smooth from years of use. As he finished tightening the last bolt on the bicycle, he heard his mother's voice float in from the kitchen. "Jordan, Mrs. Jenkins needs your help with her toaster again," she called out, her voice light with amusement. "Sure thing, Mom. I'll be back soon," Jordan replied, setting down his wrench. He grabbed his toolbox, which was slightly larger than him, and made his way out the door, waving to his mom as he left. The streets of Millbrook felt like home. He walked past familiar sights and faces. Mr. Gus, the elderly man who prided himself on his garden, was outside, carefully tending to his roses. The sweet smell of bread wafted from the bakery, and children played tag in the park, their laughter filling the air. Every corner of Millbrook felt alive with warmth, a small town where everyone knew each other and looked out for one another. As Jordan approached Mrs. Jenkins' house, he noticed a little girl sitting on the front steps, her face crumpled in frustration. It was Emily, a 6-year-old from down the street, her wide eyes, usually bright with excitement, now filled with tears. At her feet lay her beloved doll, a gift from her grandmother. Its head hung at an odd angle, and its once bright dress was fraying at the edges. "Hey, Emily," Jordan greeted her softly, kneeling down to meet her gaze. "What's wrong?" Emily sniffed, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "My doll, she's broken. I tried to fix her, but it didn't work," she said, her voice trembling. She held the doll close, as if afraid she might fall apart further. Jordan looked at the doll, recognizing the special connection Emily had with it. With a reassuring smile, he said, "I think I can fix her for you. Why don't you bring her over to my garage? I've got all the tools we'll need." Emily's eyes lit up, a glimmer of hope replacing the sorrow in her gaze. "Really? You can make her better?" "Of course," Jordan replied, standing up and extending his hand. "Come on, we'll have her back to her old self in no time." The two made their way to Jordan's garage, where his workbench awaited, cluttered with tools and mementos from his past projects. Emily watched in wonder as Jordan placed her doll gently on the bench, examining her with the same care he would a prized possession. The garage walls were covered in photos, each one a testament to his dedication. Toys he'd restored, radios he'd fixed, even old watches he'd brought back to life. It was clear that Jordan took pride in his work and that helping others brought him as much joy as the actual task itself. As he examined the doll, Jordan reached for a needle and thread. "All right, Emily, it looks like her head just needs a few stitches. I'll also add some glue to make sure she's good as new." Emily watched with rapt attention, her small fingers playing nervously with the hem of her dress. Jordan's hands moved swiftly, his fingers deftly guiding the needle through the fabric with practiced ease. He hummed a little tune as he worked, glancing up occasionally to reassure Emily with a smile. "You know, I once fixed a toy train for Tommy from Oak Avenue," Jordan said, keeping the conversation light to ease Emily's nerves. When he got it back, he was so excited that he ran all over town showing it off. Emily's eyes sparkled with amusement as she imagined the scene. "Did it make a choo-choo sound?" Jordan chuckled. "Of course. It even had a little bell that went ding-ding whenever it moved." Emily giggled, her previous sadness fading as she listened to Jordan's story. She leaned forward, watching as he sewed the last stitch, and carefully dabbed a bit of glue to secure the doll's head in place. Finally, he held up the doll, inspecting his work one last time before handing her back to Emily. "All done," he said proudly. "She's ready for another adventure." Emily's face lit up with joy as she took her beloved doll into her arms, hugging it tightly. "Thank you, Jordan. You fixed her. You're the best," she exclaimed, her voice filled with gratitude. Jordan felt a warm glow of satisfaction spread through him, the kind of fulfillment that only came from helping someone in need. Emily wrapped her arms around him in a tight hug, and he returned it, feeling a deep sense of pride in knowing he had made a small but meaningful difference. With a beaming smile, Emily scampered off, her doll clutched tightly to her chest, eager to show her mother. Jordan watched her disappear down the street, a feeling of contentment settling over him. To him, fixing things wasn't just a hobby. It was a way to give back to the town that had given him so much. Little did he know, this small act of kindness would soon set off a chain reaction that would ripple through the town, touching lives in ways he could never have imagined. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a golden hue over Millbrook, Jordan returned to his workshop, ready to tackle the next project that awaited him. But the impact of his gesture was only just beginning. His simple act of kindness would open doors, spark friendships, and lead to changes that would transform not only Emily's day but his own life as well. The seeds of hope and compassion he had planted were just beginning to bloom, and Millbrook was about to witness the power of a young boy with a heart of gold. Ripples of change. The next morning dawned bright and clear, with the sun casting long shadows across Millbrook as if heralding a new beginning. Jordan woke up to the familiar sounds of birds singing outside his window, and a warm feeling lingered from the day before. Helping Emily had been more than just fixing a doll. It was a reminder of why he loved what he did. There was a joy in bringing happiness to others, especially in the little ways that often went unnoticed. After breakfast, Jordan headed to his workshop, his mind buzzing with ideas for future projects. The garage had become his sanctuary, a place where he could let his imagination roam freely. He planned to organize his tools, sort out spare parts, and maybe even start on an old radio he'd found in the attic. He had barely rolled up his sleeves when he heard a soft knock at the garage door. Standing there was Mrs. Jenkins, her usual cheerful smile replaced with a look of admiration. "Jordan, I heard you helped little Emily fix her doll yesterday," she began. "You really have a gift, young man. Millbrook is lucky to have someone as kind and talented as you." Jordan blushed, unused to such praise. "Oh, it was nothing, Mrs. Jenkins. I'm always happy to help." "Well, I wanted to tell you that Emily hasn't stopped talking about it. Her mother said she kept showing everyone her new doll at the grocery store this morning." Mrs. Jenkins chuckled. "I'm telling you, Jordan, you're making a difference around here, even if you don't realize it." She handed him a small tin of cookies, her personal way of saying thank you. "These are for you, dear, a little treat for our neighborhood hero." As Mrs. Jenkins walked away, Jordan felt his cheeks warm with pride. He wasn't used to being called a hero. Fixing things was just something he loved, something he felt called to do. But Mrs. Jenkins's words echoed in his mind, filling him with a new sense of purpose. Maybe he could do more to help the people in Millbrook, more than just fixing broken things. The idea felt strange yet exciting, and it tugged at his heart, urging him to explore this path further. Later that day, Jordan decided to take a walk around town to clear his mind and perhaps get inspired for his next project. As he strolled past the bakery, he spotted Mr. Walters, the town's baker, frantically kneading dough with a frazzled expression on his face. Inside, the bakery was packed with customers, each one eagerly waiting for their turn. "Good afternoon, Mr. Walters," Jordan greeted him with a polite wave. "Is everything all right?" "Oh, Jordan, my boy," Mr. Walters exclaimed, wiping flour from his forehead. "I'm in a bit of a pickle. My oven's been acting up, and it's slowing down my orders. Folks have been waiting longer than usual, and I'm afraid I'll start losing customers." Jordan's eyes lit up. "Would you like me to take a look? I can't promise anything, but maybe I can help." Mr. Walters looked at him with a mixture of hope and relief. "If you could, that would be wonderful. The oven's been giving me trouble for days, and I haven't had time to call a repairman." Jordan followed Mr. Walters into the back of the bakery, where the warm aroma of freshly baked bread filled the air. The large industrial oven hummed and sputtered, its internal mechanisms making an unusual clanking noise. Jordan set his toolbox down, rolled up his sleeves, and inspected the machine. After a few minutes of tinkering, he discovered that one of the oven's heating elements was loose. With a quick adjustment and a bit of tightening, the clanking noise subsided, and the oven began working smoothly again. Mr. Walters beamed. "Jordan, you're a lifesaver. I can't thank you enough. Let me give you something in return." Jordan shook his head. "No need, Mr. Walters. I'm just glad I could help. You don't need to give me anything." But Mr. Walters wouldn't take no for an answer. He handed Jordan a warm loaf of bread, fresh from the oven. "Consider this a small token of my gratitude. You're doing so much for our little town, Jordan. Don't ever stop being who you are." Jordan left the bakery with a heart full of pride and a loaf of bread under his arm. As he continued down the street, he saw familiar faces smiling and nodding at him, each one showing silent appreciation for the boy who always seemed to have time for everyone's troubles. Word of Jordan's acts of kindness began to spread throughout Millbrook. By the time he returned home that evening, he felt like he'd accomplished something far greater than just fixing an oven or a doll. It was as if a small spark had been ignited within the town, a reminder of the kindness and support that held Millbrook together. The next few days passed in a blur of new projects and small favors. Mrs. Thompson needed her rickety old chair repaired, and Mr. Grant had trouble with his lawnmower. Each task brought a fresh sense of purpose. Each repair felt like another thread weaving the community tighter together. Jordan found himself working longer hours, yet he didn't mind. The appreciation and gratitude he received in return made every effort worth it. One afternoon, as Jordan was repairing a child's toy truck, his mother walked into the garage, her face glowing with pride. "Jordan, I just had a visit from the town council," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "They've heard about everything you've been doing around Millbrook, and they want to thank you for all your help." Jordan looked up in surprise. "The town council? Really? I'm just doing what I love, Mom." Lisa chuckled, ruffling his hair. "I know you are, sweetheart, but sometimes the things we do out of love end up making a much bigger difference than we ever imagined. They've organized a small gathering in the park this weekend. They want to honor you and celebrate the kindness you brought to our town." Jordan's mind raced. The idea of being honored in front of the whole town was both thrilling and nerve-wracking. He'd never considered himself a hero, just someone who enjoyed lending a hand. But the thought of being recognized for his work stirred a mix of excitement and humility within him. On the day of the gathering, the town of Millbrook came alive with excitement. Banners were strung up in the park, children ran around laughing, and the air was filled with the scent of flowers and fresh pastries. People from every corner of town gathered to celebrate Jordan's contributions, each one eager to express their gratitude. As Jordan stepped onto the small stage set up in the park, a hush fell over the crowd. His mother stood beside him, beaming with pride, while familiar faces from the community looked up at him with admiration. Mrs. Jenkins, Mr. Walters, and even little Emily were there, each one holding small tokens of appreciation. The town mayor, Mr. Benson, took the microphone and addressed the crowd. Today, we're here to honor a young man whose selflessness has touched the hearts of everyone in Millbrook. Jordan Carter has shown us that even the smallest acts of kindness can have a profound impact on our community. He has reminded us that true wealth is not in possessions, but in the love and generosity we share. Jordan listened, feeling a deep sense of pride mixed with humility. When the mayor handed him a plaque that read, "Millbrook's Young Hero," the crowd erupted in applause. Jordan could feel his heart pounding as he looked out at the faces before him, each one shining with gratitude. As the applause died down, Jordan stepped up to the microphone, his voice filled with emotion. "Thank you, everyone. I'm really honored, but I just did what felt right. This town has given me so much, and it's a privilege to be able to give back. I hope that we can all keep looking out for each other, even in the little ways, because that's what makes Millbrook special." His words hung in the air, resonating with the spirit of the town. From that day forward, Millbrook felt a renewed sense of unity. People began to reach out more, to lend a helping hand without hesitation. Neighbors who had never spoken before started greeting each other, and small acts of kindness became a common sight. Jordan's journey was only beginning, but his small acts had already left an indelible mark on Millbrook. In his heart, he knew that the true reward wasn't the plaque or the recognition, but the smiles and gratitude he saw on the faces around him. And with each new day, he felt inspired to continue being a source of hope and kindness in his little corner of the world. A mentor's wisdom. In the weeks following the town's celebration, Jordan found himself more motivated than ever. He woke up each morning with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that his work mattered to the people of Millbrook. The appreciation from the town fueled his determination, but he also sensed a new pressure building within him. There were so many requests for repairs now, more than he'd ever had before, and he wanted to help everyone. One chilly afternoon, as he was repairing an old rocking chair for Mrs. Hargrove, the elderly woman who lived on the outskirts of town, he found himself struggling with a stubborn nail that refused to budge. He gritted his teeth, his small hands gripping the pliers tightly, but the nail wouldn't give. Frustration began to creep into his usually calm mind. Suddenly, he heard a voice from behind him, warm and wise. "Looks like you're giving that nail quite the fight, young man," it said. Jordan turned to find old Mr. Grayson standing there, his weathered face creased in a gentle smile. Mr. Grayson was a retired handyman, well respected in Millbrook, known for his remarkable woodworking skills. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and kind, steady eyes, and his age had only added to his aura of wisdom. Though he didn't take on much work anymore, his reputation was legendary. People still spoke of the beautiful oak benches he'd crafted for the town square years ago, which were as sturdy today as they were back then. Jordan wiped his brow and grinned sheepishly. "Yes, sir. This nail's a real tough one." Mr. Grayson chuckled. "Mind if I take a look?" Jordan handed him the pliers, watching as Mr. Grayson inspected the nail with a practiced eye. With a slight twist and a gentle pull, the nail popped free, as if by magic. "There's a trick to it, you see," Mr. Grayson said, handing the pliers back to Jordan. "Sometimes, it's not about strength but patience. If you approach something with too much force, you might break it. Sometimes, you just have to listen to the problem." Jordan nodded, taking in the older man's words. He had never thought of his work in that way before. "Thank you, Mr. Grayson. I'll remember that." Mr. Grayson gave him a knowing look. "I've heard about what you've been doing, Jordan. The whole town has. You've got quite the gift, son. But don't wear yourself out trying to fix the world all at once. Even the strongest hands need rest now and then." Jordan thought about this for a moment. Lately, he'd been pushing himself harder, trying to keep up with everyone's requests. It hadn't occurred to him to slow down, and the weight of the responsibilities was beginning to feel heavy. "Can I ask you something, Mr. Grayson?" Jordan asked, his voice small. "Of course," Mr. Grayson replied, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Did you ever feel like you weren't enough to help everyone?" Jordan's voice wavered slightly as he spoke. He had never admitted this feeling to anyone, but Mr. Grayson's presence made him feel safe enough to share. Mr. Grayson's face softened, and he gave Jordan a long, thoughtful look. "Oh, many times, my boy. There were always more things to fix, more people to help. But I learned something important along the way. Sometimes it's not about fixing everything, but about doing what you can, with all your heart, for the people right in front of you. And when you do it with kindness, that's enough." Jordan felt a wave of relief wash over him. He realized that he'd been carrying the weight of everyone's expectations, and he'd forgotten why he started helping people in the first place. It wasn't about being the hero or fulfilling every request. It was about making a difference, one act of kindness at a time. "Thank you, Mr. Grayson," Jordan said, feeling lighter. Mr. Grayson chuckled and patted his shoulder. "Anytime, son. And if you ever need a helping hand or just someone to talk to, you know where to find me." As Mr. Grayson left, Jordan returned to his work on Mrs. Hargrove's rocking chair, but now he felt a renewed sense of calm and purpose. He took his time, moving with patience, just as Mr. Grayson had advised. The chair's worn wood and delicate carvings began to reveal their beauty once more under his careful touch. When he finished, Mrs. Hargrove came to inspect his work, her eyes filling with gratitude. "Oh, Jordan, you've made it perfect," she exclaimed, her voice filled with emotion. "This chair belonged to my mother. I didn't think I'd ever see it whole again." Jordan smiled, feeling that familiar warmth spread through him. "I'm glad I could help, Mrs. Hargrove." She patted his cheek, her hand soft and gentle. "Thank you, dear. This means the world to me." After he finished at Mrs. Hargrove's, Jordan decided to visit Mr. Grayson's workshop. He was curious to learn more from the older man, especially after their conversation. Mr. Grayson welcomed him in with a warm smile, and Jordan marveled at the organized chaos of tools, wood scraps, and half-finished projects that filled the room. Every surface seemed to hold a story, every tool bearing the marks of years of use. "Welcome to my little world," Mr. Grayson said with a grin. "Feel free to look around." Jordan's eyes fell on an intricately carved wooden box on the workbench. It was polished to a gleaming finish, with delicate inlays that seemed to tell a story. He reached out to touch it, feeling the smooth grain beneath his fingers. "Did you make this?" he asked, his voice filled with awe. Mr. Grayson nodded. "That's one of my favorite pieces. Took me a while, but it was worth every second. You see, Jordan, when you're creating something, you have to pour a bit of yourself into it. That's what makes it special." Jordan absorbed Mr. Grayson's words, realizing that this was more than just woodworking advice. It was a lesson in life. As they talked, Mr. Grayson began to share stories from his own youth, tales of the town, and the people he had helped over the years. Each story held a lesson, each one a reminder that the simplest acts of kindness often left the deepest impact. As the afternoon wore on, Mr. Grayson pulled out an old notebook, its cover worn and frayed. Inside, sketches of furniture designs and handwritten notes filled the pages. "These are my plans," Mr. Grayson explained, his voice filled with a mixture of nostalgia and pride. "I've been keeping this notebook for years, jotting down ideas and dreams. Some of these pieces never got made, but they're a part of me." Jordan looked at the notebook with admiration, realizing that every page represented Mr. Grayson's journey as a craftsman. The old man handed the notebook to Jordan, who held it carefully, as if it were a treasure. "Keep it," Mr. Grayson said, smiling. "Maybe you'll add some sketches of your own." Jordan's eyes widened in surprise. "Are you sure, Mr. Grayson? This seems really important to you." Mr. Grayson nodded. "It is, but so are you, and I think it's time for someone else to carry on the spirit of fixing things, of caring for this town. You're more than just a handyman, Jordan. You have the heart of a craftsman, someone who can see the beauty in broken things. This notebook is just the beginning. Jordan's heart swelled with pride as he accepted the gift. The notebook felt like a rite of passage, a symbol of his commitment to helping others and keeping Millbrook's spirit alive. As he walked home that evening, Jordan's mind was filled with ideas for new projects, sketches he could add to Mr. Grayson's notebook, and ways he could continue making a difference. He realized that his journey was just beginning, and with Mr. Grayson's guidance and wisdom, he felt ready to embrace it. Over the next few weeks, Jordan took on his work with a new sense of balance and purpose. He began to choose his projects more carefully, making sure to give each one the time and attention it deserved. Whenever he felt overwhelmed, he would open Mr. Grayson's notebook, drawing inspiration from the sketches and notes that filled its pages. Slowly, he added his own drawings, each one a reflection of his unique style and vision. People in town began to notice the change in him, the way he approached each project with a quiet confidence, and the joy he found in even the smallest repairs. They saw the depth of his commitment, not just to fixing things, but to making Millbrook a better place, one act of kindness at a time. And in Jordan's heart, he knew he wasn't alone. He carried Mr. Grayson's wisdom, his mother's love, and the gratitude of the entire town with him, guiding him as he continued to grow into the young man Millbrook had come to admire. The heart of the community. Jordan's life had taken on a steady rhythm, each day bringing new projects, conversations, and challenges. He no longer felt the overwhelming pressure to fix everything for everyone. Instead, he focused on giving each task his best, treating every repair as an opportunity to bring a little more warmth and hope into Millbrook. But as winter began to settle over the town, with chilly winds and shorter days, a new challenge loomed. A challenge that would test not just Jordan's skills, but the strength of the entire community. One frosty morning, Jordan was helping his mother load bags of groceries into their small, worn-out car when he overheard a group of people talking anxiously outside the local diner. Curious, he listened in, catching bits of conversation. They say it's going to be one of the coldest winters in years. Some of the houses near the outskirts don't have proper insulation, and the old community center's heater broke down last week. They're saying it's beyond repair. Jordan's ears perked up. The community center was more than just a building in Millbrook. It was the heart of the town. Over the years, it had hosted countless events, from holiday feasts and children's birthday parties to town meetings and charity drives. But more than that, it was a place where people found warmth, both physical and emotional. For families who couldn't afford heat or hot meals during the winter, the center had always been a safe haven. Jordan's heart sank as he thought about the old, creaky heater that had finally given up. Without it, the center would have to close its doors, leaving many vulnerable people in the cold. Determined, he made a decision right then and there. He would try to fix the heater. After dropping off the groceries at home, Jordan grabbed his toolbox and made his way to the community center. The center was quiet, the usual lively energy replaced with an eerie stillness. The main hall, usually bustling with laughter and chatter, felt empty and cold. As he made his way to the back room where the heater was stored, he found Mrs. Willard, the elderly woman who managed the center. Her face lit up when she saw him. "Jordan, what a pleasant surprise. What brings you here, young man?" she asked, pulling her shawl tighter against the cold. "I heard about the heater, Mrs. Willard," Jordan replied, smiling reassuringly. "I wanted to see if there's anything I could do to help." Mrs. Willard looked at him, her eyes softening with gratitude. "Oh, Jordan, you're a blessing, you know that. But I don't want you getting your hopes up. The repairman said it was too old, that it would cost more to fix than it's worth." Jordan gave her a determined nod. "I'll take a look anyway. I've fixed some pretty old things before." Mrs. Willard led him to the small utility room in the back, where the old heater stood, silent and cold. Jordan set down his toolbox and began his examination. The heater was indeed ancient. its pipes rusty, and its wiring brittle. But as he examined it closer, he felt a spark of hope. While it would be a tough job, he believed he could patch it up enough to keep it running for another winter. Hours passed as Jordan worked, tightening screws, reattaching wires, and replacing worn-out parts with bits and pieces he had scrounged from his own workshop. His hands were numb from the cold, and his breath fogged the air. But he kept at it, driven by the thought of the families who relied on the center's warmth. Just as the sun was beginning to set, Jordan turned the heater on, holding his breath as it sputtered to life. At first, there was nothing but a weak hum, and then, with a soft roar, warm air began to flow. A wave of relief washed over him, and he let out a laugh, a sound that seemed to fill the cold, empty room with warmth. Mrs. Willard clapped her hands in delight. "Oh, Jordan, you did it." She pulled him into a hug, her frail arms trembling with emotion. "You've saved the center, and you've saved so many people from the cold." Jordan blushed, feeling the familiar warmth of pride in his chest. "I'm glad I could help, Mrs. Willard. It might not last forever, but it should get us through this winter." Word spread quickly through Millbrook. People began to gather at the community center that evening, bringing blankets, food, and supplies. It was as if the whole town had decided to come together to ensure no one faced the winter alone. Mr. Grayson, Jordan's mentor, arrived with a donation of firewood for anyone who needed extra heat. Mrs. Jenkins brought trays of hot cocoa and cookies. Even the children pitched in, organizing games to keep everyone's spirits high. As the night wore on, the once empty hall was filled with warmth and laughter. Jordan watched as families huddled together, enjoying the cozy space that his efforts had helped keep open. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction, but there was also a realization that the town needed more than just repairs and temporary fixes. They needed a way to ensure that no one would go without warmth or shelter. The next day, the town council held an emergency meeting to discuss the situation. Inspired by Jordan's actions, they proposed a new plan, a fund to help the community center cover essential repairs and provide heating assistance to families in need. The council members discussed ways to raise money, from organizing bake sales to hosting donation drives. The entire town was ready to come together, and it was all because a young boy had reminded them of the power of community. Jordan was invited to the meeting, sitting among the town's leaders for the first time in his life. As he listened to their plans, he felt both humbled and excited. His efforts had ignited something larger than himself, a wave of compassion that had brought everyone together. When it was his turn to speak, he stood up, his heart pounding with a mixture of nerves and pride. "Thank you for inviting me here," he began, his voice steady. "I know that fixing the heater was just a small thing, but it made me realize something important. We're stronger when we come together, and I believe that Millbrook can be a place where no one has to go through hard times alone. The community center isn't just a building. It's a home for all of us." The room fell silent as his words hung in the air. People nodded in agreement, moved by the wisdom coming from someone so young. Even the mayor, a stoic man who rarely showed emotion, dabbed at his eyes with a handkerchief. Over the next few weeks, the town buzzed with activity as everyone pitched in to raise funds for the center. Jordan spent his afternoons helping out in any way he could, organizing supplies, working with Mr. Grayson on small repairs, and even painting walls to freshen up the space. Local businesses donated materials, artists volunteered to decorate the center, and musicians performed at fundraising events. It was as if Millbrook had been transformed, each person eager to contribute in their own way. The community center became a symbol of unity and resilience, a testament to the spirit that bound Millbrook together. People began to share their own skills and resources more freely, offering to help each other with tasks, whether it was fixing leaky roofs, babysitting, or sharing meals. What had started as a simple repair had blossomed into a movement, a renewed commitment to the values that defined their town. One crisp Saturday morning, as winter's chill still hung in the air, the town held a celebration at the community center. They had managed to raise enough funds not only to keep the center warm, but to install a new heating system that would last for years to come. The hall was decorated with handmade banners, children's artwork, and thank you notes from families who had been touched by the community's kindness. Jordan stood at the heart of the crowd, surrounded by people who had become more than just neighbors. They were his extended family. He looked around, seeing faces filled with gratitude, love, and hope. Mrs. Willard approached him, handing him a small, neatly wrapped gift. "This is for you, Jordan. It's just a little something to thank you for all that you've done," she said, her eyes glistening with tears. Jordan unwrapped the gift to find a beautifully crafted wooden plaque engraved with his name and the words, "Millbrook's Heart of Kindness." He felt his throat tighten as he traced his fingers over the lettering, overwhelmed by the gesture. Mr. Grayson placed a hand on his shoulder, smiling proudly. "You've done something remarkable, son. You've reminded us all of what it means to be part of a community. And this town will always remember the kindness you've shown." As the people of Millbrook raised their glasses in a toast to Jordan, he felt a deep, unshakable sense of belonging. He understood now that his work was more than just fixing things. It was about building connections, strengthening bonds, and inspiring others to look out for one another. The community had rallied around him, but more importantly, they had rallied around each other. And as Jordan looked around at the smiling faces, he knew that Millbrook had been changed for the better, not just by his actions, but by the shared kindness that had blossomed in the heart of winter. An unexpected challenge. As the harsh winter months persisted, Millbrook's sense of unity grew stronger than ever. The community center had become a warm and lively haven, bustling with activity and laughter. Every day, townspeople gathered to share meals, swap stories, and help one another with the challenges of winter. Jordan felt deeply proud of the changes he'd helped inspire, knowing that he had played a part in fostering this incredible sense of togetherness. But just as the town was settling into this new rhythm, an unexpected challenge emerged. In early February, a powerful winter storm swept over the region. The storm was unlike anything the town had seen in years, with heavy snow blanketing the streets and freezing winds whipping through the air. Schools were closed, roads became impassable, and many people were forced to hunker down in their homes. As the storm intensified, Jordan noticed something strange. Power outages were spreading through Millbrook, leaving entire neighborhoods in the dark. People relied on the community center more than ever, but the center itself was at risk. When Jordan arrived there the following morning, he was greeted by a worried Mrs. Willard. "Jordan, I'm so glad you're here," she said, her face etched with concern. "We have a big problem. The power went out in half of the center last night, and it looks like the backup generator isn't working either. Without it, we won't be able to keep everyone warm, especially with this storm raging on." Jordan's heart skipped a beat. The generator was crucial. It was the only thing keeping the center warm during the blackout. If he couldn't fix it, many families who had come to rely on the center's warmth and shelter would be left in the cold. Despite the rising pressure, Jordan took a steadying breath, determined to help once again. "Let me take a look at it, Mrs. Willard. I'll do my best," he assured her, grabbing his toolbox and heading to the small utility room where the generator was kept. The room was cold, and the air smelled faintly of oil and metal. The generator sat in the corner, a sturdy machine that had seen years of service. Jordan knelt down and inspected it carefully, his fingers already numb from the chill. He could see signs of wear and tear, but it was a complicated machine, far more advanced than the small appliances he was used to fixing. He wasn't sure if he could do it alone. As he was examining the generator, he heard a familiar voice behind him. "Need a hand, son?" Jordan turned to find Mr. Grayson standing in the doorway, bundled up in a thick coat. The older man's presence immediately filled Jordan with a renewed sense of confidence. "Mr. Grayson, I didn't think anyone would be able to make it through the snow," Jordan said, relief evident in his voice. Mr. Grayson chuckled, patting Jordan's shoulder. "Well, I've lived through my share of winter storms, and I've learned that no snowstorm is going to stop me from helping a friend in need. Now, let's see what we've got here." Together, they set to work, examining the generator's inner workings with flashlights and carefully probing each component. Mr. Grayson guided Jordan, explaining each part of the machine as they went, his steady hands making adjustments while Jordan handed him tools. The older man's calm demeanor made a difficult task feel manageable. After what felt like hours, they pinpointed the problem: a worn-out fuse and a broken fuel line. Jordan rummaged through his toolbox and managed to find a spare fuse, but the fuel line posed a bigger issue. Without it, the generator wouldn't run for long, and with the storm still raging outside, finding a replacement would be nearly impossible. Mr. Grayson scratched his head thoughtfully. "Looks like we're in a bit of a bind, but maybe we can rig up a temporary fix with some spare tubing. It won't last forever, but it should buy us enough time until the roads clear up and we can get a new part." Jordan nodded, inspired by Mr. Grayson's resourcefulness. "Let's do it." Carefully, they crafted a makeshift fuel line from spare tubing and clamps, securing it in place with duct tape and checking each connection to make sure it was sealed tightly. It was far from perfect, but it just might hold long enough to keep the community center running through the storm. With bated breath, they flipped the generator switch. For a moment, nothing happened, and Jordan's heart sank. But then, slowly, the machine whirred to life, and a faint hum filled the room as power surged back through the building. They both let out a sigh of relief, exchanging a triumphant smile. Mrs. Willard hurried into the room, her face lighting up as she saw the generator back online. "Oh, you two did it. Thank you so much," she exclaimed, her voice filled with gratitude. "Just doing what we can, Mrs. Willard," Mr. Grayson said with a nod. He turned to Jordan, his eyes full of pride. "And I couldn't have done it without my young apprentice here." Jordan felt a surge of pride and gratitude. Working side by side with Mr. Grayson had given him a deeper appreciation for the older man's wisdom and experience, as well as for the value of teamwork. He knew he'd learned lessons that would stay with him for life. But as the evening wore on, Jordan realized that the storm wasn't just challenging the community center, it was testing the entire town. Word began to spread that several homes, particularly those on the outskirts, were completely without heat or electricity. A sense of worry rippled through Millbrook, especially for the elderly residents who lived alone and couldn't get to the community center. The next morning, despite the treacherous conditions, Jordan and Mr. Grayson decided to take action. They set out together with blankets, portable heaters, and food supplies, determined to help the residents who were most in need. Navigating the snowy streets was difficult, but they persevered, using a sled to carry their supplies. Other neighbors soon joined in, forming small groups to check on those who might need assistance. They first visited Mrs. Hargrove, who was in her late 70s and lived in a small, drafty house on the edge of town. She greeted them with a grateful smile, her frail hands trembling as she took the blankets they offered. "Oh, thank you both. I don't know what I would have done," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was beginning to think no one would come." Jordan placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We'll always come, Mrs. Hargrove. You're part of Millbrook, and we look after each other." As they continued their rounds, Jordan felt the strength of the community in every act of kindness he witnessed. Neighbors were lending each other firewood, sharing food, and offering places to stay. It was as if the storm had brought out the very best in everyone, reminding them that even the fiercest winter couldn't extinguish the warmth of their shared bonds. By the end of the day, Jordan was exhausted but deeply fulfilled. His arms ached from hauling supplies through the snow, and his cheeks were red from the biting wind, but his heart was full. He knew that Millbrook had come through the storm together, stronger than before. As he and Mr. Grayson made their way back to the community center that evening, Mr. Grayson turned to him with a warm smile. "You know, Jordan, you've done more for this town than most people do in a lifetime. You've got a rare spirit, son, one that doesn't give up, even when things get tough." Jordan felt a deep sense of humility as he listened to Mr. Grayson's words. I couldn't have done any of this without you and everyone else in town. It's not just me. It's all of us." Mr. Grayson nodded, his eyes glinting with pride. "That's the beauty of it, Jordan. You've reminded everyone of what it means to be a community. And that's something that will last far beyond any storm." In the following days, as the snow began to melt and the roads cleared, Millbrook returned to its usual rhythm. But something had shifted in the town's spirit. The experience of facing the storm together had left an indelible mark on the community, and people began to speak of Jordan's bravery and kindness with even greater reverence. The mayor organized another gathering at the community center to celebrate the resilience of Millbrook's people, and Jordan was invited to speak. As he stood in front of the crowd, looking at the familiar faces of friends, neighbors, and family, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. "Thank you, everyone," he began, his voice steady and strong. "I just want to say that this winter storm showed us all how strong we are when we come together. It reminded me that no matter how tough things get, we're never alone, not when we have each other. Millbrook is more than just a town. It's a family, and I'm proud to be a part of it." A wave of applause and cheers filled the room, and Jordan's heart swelled as he saw the love and admiration in the eyes of the people around him. He knew then that his role in Millbrook was more than just fixing broken things. He was a bridge, connecting people, inspiring kindness, and strengthening the bonds that held their community together. And as he looked out over the crowd, he felt certain that Millbrook's future was bright, no matter what challenges lay ahead. With the people of Millbrook by his side, he was ready to face anything. A legacy of kindness. As winter gradually released its grip on Millbrook, the town blossomed with renewed life and color. Snow melted to reveal sprigs of green grass, and early blooms dotted the landscape. For Jordan, the turning season was a time of reflection. His experiences over the winter, the community center repairs, the power outages, and the storm relief efforts had transformed him in ways he was only beginning to understand. He'd learned not just about the art of fixing things, but the art of connecting with people, the resilience of a united community, and the power of kindness to create lasting change. Spring brought fresh opportunities, and the townsfolk of Millbrook were more inspired than ever. They decided to build on the spirit of unity that Jordan had sparked, starting new initiatives to keep the town vibrant and supportive for everyone. The community center, now equipped with a brand new heating system thanks to their fundraising, became a hub of activity. A committee formed to organize regular events, from potlucks and movie nights to skill-sharing workshops. And at the heart of every discussion, every planning meeting, was the name Jordan Carter, a reminder of the young boy whose kindness had brought them all together. One morning, as Jordan was helping Mrs. Willard organize supplies for a spring cleanup event at the community center, she approached him with a twinkle in her eye. "Jordan, you've been the heart of this center, you know that," she said, her voice warm with affection. "We've been talking, and the committee has decided that we'd like to create a special program in your honor. We're calling it the Jordan Carter Kindness Initiative." Jordan's eyes widened, a mix of surprise and humility flooding his expression. "A program? For me? But I just fixed a few things, Mrs. Willard. I didn't do anything big enough for that." Mrs. Willard placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Oh, but you did, Jordan. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest acts. You showed us all what kindness looks like, and that kindness brought everyone together. That's no small thing. We want to make sure that your spirit of generosity lives on, and we hope that this initiative will encourage others to follow your example." The initiative, as Mrs. Willard explained, would support projects that fostered community connection and kindness. The town planned to set up a small fund to help people launch projects or services that could benefit Millbrook, whether it was starting a community garden, organizing support for elderly residents, or even offering classes at the community center. And it would all be done with the spirit of compassion and unity that Jordan had inspired. Jordan's heart swelled with a mixture of pride and gratitude. He had never thought of himself as someone who could spark such change, But now he realized that kindness, even in its simplest forms, could be powerful enough to leave a legacy. As the weeks went on, Jordan became an ambassador of the initiative, encouraging people to think of ways they could contribute to the town. He found himself helping to organize events, talking to neighbors about their ideas, and brainstorming ways to support people in need. In every conversation, he felt a growing sense of purpose, as if he were part of something much larger than himself. One warm afternoon, Mr. Grayson invited Jordan to his workshop, saying he had a surprise. When Jordan arrived, he found Mr. Grayson sitting beside a large wooden crate covered with a cloth. The older man smiled knowingly as Jordan approached. "I thought it was time I passed something on to you, Jordan," Mr. Grayson said, patting the top of the crate. "It's something that's been with me for many years, but now I believe it belongs with you." Curious and a bit nervous, Jordan reached for the cloth and lifted it, revealing an old but beautifully maintained toolbox. The wood was dark and polished, with intricate carvings around the edges that Mr. Grayson must have made himself. Jordan traced his fingers over the carvings, feeling the depth of the craftsmanship. "This was my father's toolbox," Mr. Grayson explained, his voice soft with nostalgia. "He taught me everything I know, just like I've tried to pass on a bit of what I know to you. This toolbox has helped me through countless repairs, and it's been a part of every piece I've made in this town. Now, I want you to have it. You're ready, Jordan, ready to carry on the work, not just of fixing things, but of bringing people together." Jordan's throat tightened with emotion as he took in the gift. He could feel the weight of its history, the generations of hands that had held it before him. "Thank you, Mr. Grayson. I don't know what to say. This means so much." "You don't have to say anything, son," Mr. Grayson replied, his eyes warm with pride. "Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep being you." With his new toolbox in hand, Jordan continued his work in the town, carrying with him the legacy of Mr. Grayson's wisdom and his own commitment to making Millbrook a place where no one felt alone. And soon, he had an idea that he hoped would take the spirit of the kindness initiative even further. One evening, as the community gathered for a town hall meeting, Jordan raised his hand to speak. The room quieted, and all eyes turned to him. Standing up, he cleared his throat, nervous but determined. "I've been thinking about how we can make Millbrook an even better place," he began, "and I'd like to propose a new project. I call it the Fix It Forward program." Curiosity spread through the crowd, and the mayor nodded encouragingly. "Go on, Jordan." Jordan took a breath and continued. "The Fix It Forward program would be a way for people to help each other with repairs and projects. If someone needs help fixing something, like a bike, or a heater, or even a leaky faucet, they could ask for help through the program. And if they're able, they'd agree to fix it forward by helping someone else in the future. It doesn't have to be a repair. It could be anything, like running an errand or cooking a meal for someone who needs it." As he spoke, Jordan could see people nodding, their faces lighting up with excitement. He went on, feeling a surge of confidence. "This way, we're all helping each other, not just through big gestures, but through small, everyday acts. And every time someone helps someone else, it strengthens our community." The room filled with murmurs of approval and admiration. The mayor looked around at the council members, who were all smiling and nodding. He turned back to Jordan, his face beaming. "Jordan, that's a wonderful idea," he said. "It embodies everything the Kindness Initiative stands for. I think we should move forward with it. How does everyone feel?" The room erupted in applause, and Jordan felt a wave of happiness wash over him. He looked over at his mother, who was smiling through tears, and then at Mr. Grayson, whose pride was evident in his gaze. Jordan knew that this idea wasn't just his. It was the result of the kindness he had received and the lessons he learned from everyone around him. In the months that followed, the Fix It Forward program became a beloved part of Millbrook. People of all ages volunteered their time and skills, and the town thrived under the simple yet powerful idea of giving back. Jordan became a mentor to other kids, teaching them basic repairs and encouraging them to think about how they could make a difference. The program created countless moments of connection, from young children helping elderly neighbors with groceries to adults repairing playground equipment for the community's children. Millbrook grew stronger, its bonds unbreakable, woven together by the shared commitment to kindness and support. And every time someone lent a hand, they thought of Jordan, the young boy who had started it all with his willingness to help. Years passed, and Jordan grew older, but his commitment to Millbrook never wavered. The Fix It Forward program continued to thrive, inspiring towns nearby to start their own initiatives. And as he stepped into adulthood, Jordan realized that his future lay in community work, in spreading the spirit of Millbrook's kindness to other places that needed it. One summer, as he prepared to leave for college to study community development, the town held a farewell celebration for him at the community center. It was an emotional evening filled with laughter, memories, and heartfelt farewells. People shared stories of how Jordan's kindness had touched their lives, each one a testament to the ripple effect he had started years ago. In the center of the hall, surrounded by friends, family, and neighbors, Jordan took a moment to express his gratitude. "Thank you, everyone, for showing me the power of community and for teaching me that kindness isn't just about what we do, it's about who we are. Millbrook will always be my home, and I promise to carry everything you've taught me into whatever I do." As he looked out over the faces of the people who had shaped him, Jordan felt a profound sense of fulfillment. He knew that his journey wasn't ending. It was only beginning. And wherever he went, he would carry with him the spirit of Millbrook, the legacy of kindness that had transformed not just his life, but the lives of everyone around him. As the celebration drew to a close, Mr. Grayson approached him, his eyes glistening with pride. "Well, son, I think it's safe to say that you've left your mark on this town. And wherever life takes you, just remember, you've got a home here and a family who believes in you." Jordan smiled, hugging his mentor tightly. "Thank you, Mr. Grayson. I'll never forget what you've taught me." With one last look around the room, Jordan left that night, ready to take his next steps. And though he didn't know exactly where his path would lead, he knew one thing for certain. He would always be guided by the lessons of Millbrook, by the legacy of kindness that would forever be a part of him, and by the hope that he could bring a little bit of Millbrook's light to the world.